Ladies and gentlemen, I can see that we're all very excited to move forward into our next panel discussion that we will dive into right away. The topic for the next panel discussion is our institutions teach neither leadership nor ethics. I think this topic will be of interest to all the students sitting back there. Without further ado, I request the chairperson for this panel discussion, Mr. Debashish Chatterjee, Director IIM Kozhikode, to please join me on stage. We also have here with us Mr. G. Vishwanathan, Chancellor, VIT University, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, Chairman and Managing Director, Kevin Care, Mr. Chiranjeev Banerjee, Country Manager, Education and Geo Expansion, HP India Sales, Ms. Gauri Ishwaran, CEO, Global Education and Leadership Foundation, and Mr. Sijo Kuruvilla George, CEO, Startup Village. I request all of you to kindly come up on stage and take your seats so that we may begin. Debashish Chatterjee, Director IIM Kozhikode, Mr. G. Vishwanathan, Chancellor, VIT University. Let's keep the applause going, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, Chairman and Managing Director, Kevin Care. Mr. Chiranjeev Banerjee, Country Manager, Education and Geo Expansion, HP India Sales. Ms. Gauri Ishwaran, CEO, Global Education and Leadership Foundation. And Mr. Sijo Kuruvilla George, CEO, Startup Village. I now hand over the proceedings to our chairperson, Mr. Debashish Chatterjee. Over to you, sir.
Well, I'm grateful that this conclave has brought together some very eminent educators in what I see is a festival of ideas. Last year, I've had the privilege of going around the country among 11,000 teachers and principals, and I asked a question consistently. The question was, what is it that you teach? And the response I got were pretty consistent. They were either teaching geography, history, chemistry, sometimes ethics. And then the counter question I would ask is, does anybody teach a student here? And obviously there would be some degree of silence. And the fact is that the space of education is a space that is mediated by two worlds. One is the human world, the other is the systems of the business world. You know, we have a bunch of very eminent people from both worlds. I'm going to introduce them very briefly. However, the human world creates what you call leadership or ethics, and the systems world merely organizes it. So the proposition today, our institutions teach neither leadership nor ethics, assumes, and maybe presumes, not really assumes, that leadership or ethics can really be taught. I'm sure there'll be different points of views on this. The word leadership or ethics is not merely a word, it's part and parcel of life as we understand it. Now, if you look at this systems world and the human world as distinctly different, then you will know that the right to education belongs to the systems world. But the responsibility to educate belongs to the human world. By just guaranteeing right to education, you are not really fulfilling the responsibility of the educator to really educate, because through legislation you cannot ensure education, and this is pretty clear. So if I start with leadership, one recognizes that, you know, by covering a syllabus called leadership, you do not discover the leader, because, you know, covering a syllabus does not mean discovery of leadership. Leadership has to be discovered not in the classrooms but in the field of practice, because that's where leadership emanates. And our great speakers here, Mrs. Gauri Ishwaran, will be the first of the 5 speakers. She's done enormous amount of work in the school system. Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, very well known in the industry space, but he has some radical ideas on education. Mr. G. Vishwanathan, Does not need an introduction really, because he's the Chancellor of VIT, a huge university. There's come Chiranjeev Banerjee from the corporate space, and Sijo Kuruvilla George, who's doing some very interesting work in the startup space. So are leaders born or made? And this is a question that I think this panel will look at. And if I were to follow a person whose name is Lee Kuan Yew, who was the architect of modern Singapore, he was asked the question, are leaders born or made? He said, leaders can be made provided they're born. And then you ask that counter question, well, if they cannot be made, what's the point of educating leaders? Then you realize that we can provide such tools as analysis, as synthesis, as reflective questions in the classroom, but you cannot, or critical reflection, but you cannot really make leaders through a curriculum. I mean, this is something that is utterly impractical. We had a student in IIM, class of 2003, who died, who was shot dead by the mafia, oil mafia in Uttar Pradesh, because he shut down some petrol pumps that were adulterating oil. And when he died, and his news appeared in the Indian Express, incidentally, on the 7th or 8th page. Somebody said, this is your student, isn't it? And then I realized it was a student called Manjunath, who used to ask a simple question that we used to teach in our leadership course. And the question was, if livelihood is for life, what is life for? And Manjunath seemed to ask this question, what's the point of living if you have nothing to die for? And I think the fundamental questions around leadership and ethics go back to something very core about human aspiration. It's a life and death question. It's not a curriculum question. So ethics and leadership are both inside out and intentional processes. You cannot really encompass leadership or ethics as just a systems phenomena. You have to learn to discriminate. And that art of discrimination, if you look at the Indian expression called dharma, it encompasses the faculty of discrimination. And I think dharma is not something that resides only in the formal space. Dharma is widely distributed. People with not so great education can be really ethical, can be really a leader. And now we have politicians in our midst, we have policymakers, and the mahal for politicians is not very good these days. However, I'm just going to end with a little story of a person who's in Kargil, who's from the political space, very erudite. He goes and inspects what is called a semi-automatic weapon, okay? And he cannot figure out which side is the nozzle of the gun. So he's asking the soldier, who is not really educated in the formal sense, which side should point towards the enemy. The soldier points towards him and says, sir, does not matter. You hold the gun very close to your chest and press the trigger. Whichever side it fires, it is good for the country. So you can see the knowledge of what is right is very deeply embedded in our psyche. I'm not going to waste any more of your time, and I'll get the first of our speaker, Gauri Ishwaran, to come and share her notes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted that I'm here to speak on a topic that's very close to my heart. And I want to start with a quotation by Joanna Ciola. In leadership, we see ethics magnified, and it is fundamental to the understanding of good leadership. What many of us fail to realize that leadership is actually a relationship. It's one dimension of relationship in human society. And by understanding the ethics of this relationship, we actually get a better understanding of leadership. Because the central issues in ethics are also the central issues in leadership. They include personal challenges, authenticity, self-interest, self-discipline, moral obligations related to justice, duty, competence, and the greatest good. This is in the abstract domain. Unfortunately, most of us relate this abstract domain to reality when it comes to higher education. And I'm firmly convinced that we are looking at the wrong end of the stick. If you are looking at good relationship, if you're looking at good leadership with altruism and ethics and a bias to action built in, this relationship, this dimension has to be fostered, nurtured, guided, mentored from the school level. It is from here that you are able to mold character, from here that you are able to inject changes in the attitude. By the time they reach the higher education, it's too late very often because the mindset is already fixed. Unfortunately, many of us do not see this point of view, and I want to give a very small example of my own personal experience. When I had to prescribe textbook for the primary school, I had a huge issue because every book I picked would give examples like, this is my father, he's driving the car. This is my mother, she's washing the clothes, or she is cooking. And I had a real issue with this because this is how we instill into the young minds the gender distinction. And we have leaders today, and we all comment very often on those leaders and wonder why they are so gender insensitive, even if they are women. It is because we have fostered this mindset in them. And it is imperative that into the school curriculum, we inject these aspects. Why are we so focused on maths, physics, chemistry? You know, in the years to come, in the 21st century, in the next few decades, these specialized areas are not going to make such a difference. If you want to succeed globally in the 21st century, you need to show the attributes of collaboration, of negotiation, of how will you deal with ethical dilemmas, how will you resolve conflicts. Do we do anything about this in our schools? And you know, these are all bound with ethics. Because if you want to talk about teamwork, what does it imply? It implies integrity, trust, ability to work with others, respect. All our universal values come into that. Only thing is we have to realize that our children are growing up in a different world. And our old perspectives need to be refashioned to suit the mind of the young child as well as the need that we have for the future. Another thing, when we talk about leadership, even if I were to ask many of you, this question I often ask, who are leaders? What's the first answer I get from students? Sachin Tendulkar, Shah Rukh Khan. It takes a while for them to understand that there is a difference between a celebrity and a leader. Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa came much lower down. But now when I have worked with a set of students for say 3 years with the curriculum that I have framed, I get a different answer now. And when I ask them, why are you saying Mahatma Gandhi and not a Sachin Tendulkar, they are able to explain to me that a Mahatma Gandhi put himself and put the benefit of others before himself. He gave something of himself. Then I asked them questions like, you all love Abraham Lincoln, but he fought a war. Mahatma Gandhi preached non-violence. Why do we still look at them as, both of them in the same breath as leaders? What was the ethics and the values over there? And where in our education curriculum, in our schools, do we ever expose our children to such thoughts? We also tell them the life of Gandhi, the life of Lincoln, the life of X, life of Y, but do we ever allow them to think and explore those lives, to see what is it in those lives that made those people special? Do we allow them the opportunity to compare and make their own choices? We have to realize that children are not like vessels that you just fill up. They are vessels where you need to light the fire below. And what fills those vessels is something that they have to make the choices. And I'm afraid in our system, whether it is the CBSE, whether it is the ICSE, we do not address this problem at all. We do not do anything to see. Gandhiji said, if you want to be the change, if you want to have change, you have to be the change. But how can the younger generation be the change if we do not empower them with the right attitudes, with the right attributes, with the right thoughts? Are we doing anything about it at all? When we go to various education fora, the focus is so much on higher education. Government spends so much on higher education. But what about school education? That is where the crux of the matter lies. And we cannot wait. The world and India is at such a stage, we can't wait for a Mahatma Gandhi to pop up. We have to go out and do something to foster that climate, to give that opportunity, to give in those aspects in schooling which will enable people to come up to be the kind of leaders that we want. And what I'm telling you is not rocket science. Plato, so many centuries ago mentioned, leaders are like weavers. They weave together different people to produce the beautiful fabric of society. Thank you.
Very quickly, leadership is relationship. Leaders are like weavers. They weave together the fabric of society, and leadership should not be confused with being a celebrity. These were the highlights of what we just heard from Gaureshwaran, a very impactful presentation. If the intensity of the applause is a little better than the intensity with which you are looking at iPads, this will do the speakers a world of good. Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, our next speaker, sir.
Thank you, Professor, and respected dignitaries on the dais. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to make 2 points. Why I think this is a very interesting topic. I must compliment the New Indian Express for organizing such a Think Edu conference. Leadership and ethics. Leadership is the key responsibility of creating wealth. Leadership creates wealth. And what does ethics do? Ethics ensures it is sustainable. You create sustainable wealth. So it is in that paramount thing that it's very important. And we have been tom-tommed, as India, if I am to talk about India, we have been tom-tommed about, we have an opportunity to become a global manufacturing hub. I think very happy to hear. A lot of companies will come and outsource a lot of products from here. So why we should be, one way we should be happy, there is a lot of employment will be generated. On the other hand, if you have to look at, I feel very sad about that we are tom-tommed as a global manufacturing hub. That's the only opportunity that India can do, and not beyond. You know that out of top 50 brands in the world, 40 of them belongs to US, and rest of them Japan and Europe and so on. We don't even have one Indian brand across the globe amongst the top 50. It's unfortunate, but what do these brands do? They create wealth. So we end up producing goods for them in India. They come and open shop here. They make money. They give a lot of employment, absolutely no doubt. A lot of employments are generated. Finally, the money, the earned profits are departed, taken out to the countries, respective countries. So we Indians will end up working for the developed countries or for other nations. We will get for our livelihood, we'll be happy, better. But really wealth creation, the wealth what is created in India, what is consumed in India, on behalf of that, a sizable portion will go out of India. Therefore, I am not happy that India to become a manufacturing hub. So urgently we need to do something important and urgent if you overcome that. So coming back, that starts off with education and the way the kind of thing followed in our country. I see 4 stakeholders in this ecosystem. One is the students and the parents who make decisions on behalf of students at times, or not at times, many a times. And second is the educational institutions who impart educations. Third is the policy makers and regulators. Fourth is the employers. A large portion of employment comes from government. So employers also very important. To me, the employers makes a huge difference in terms of determining what kind of a person I will recruit. If the combined force of employers in India, including government, comes together and say, I am going to employ this kind of people only who are familiar with leadership, who are very good at ethics and leadership, that kind of an education background I am going to give a premium, then the whole market will change. At the end of the day, students are interested in getting a good employment, wanting to grow up in career, earn money. So whichever job offers them very good handsome salary or package, they would opt for that. So therefore, I think the responsibility of that, it's urgent thing that as policy regulators and makers to come together and think along with the employers to think as to how we should change the education system, thereby we produce leaders with ethics and create wealth for India and be a superpower in the world. And that's all I have to make. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're going next. Okay. All right, just two very, very significant points. One is leadership creates wealth, ethics sustains it. And if employers don't recruit leaders, how will schools be encouraged to generate them? I think very, very significant points from somebody who knows the business of business. And now we invite a person who is the Chancellor of VIT, somebody I told you does not need an introduction, so I will not introduce him.
Chairman Mr. Chatterjee, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. The topic says we are neither teaching ethics nor leadership. Fortunately, I can disagree from this. We are teaching ethics. We introduced the subject 4 years ago, ethics and values. And among the subjects, we are divided into core subjects and electives. And we have made ethics as a core subject, so that it is compulsory for all the 25,000 students who are studying in Vellore campus as well as Chennai campus. It's a vast subject, but it's a very, very important subject because they enter into the university or colleges at an adolescent age and they are influenced by various thoughts and events. Some of them are good, many of them are not so good. So we have to tell them what is good and what is not so good or what is bad. Mrs. Gauri Ishwaran began with Mahatma Gandhi. He laid emphasis on truth and non-violence. If the country, all of us speak truth, more than half of the problems of the country would be solved. But it's very difficult to speak truth. We have to begin with this. And I want them personal ethics. This country has a great future. We talk about the demographic dividend because we are one of the youngest nations of the world, and this youth should be preserved. That's why we have to lay emphasis on free from smoking, drinking, drugs, etc. I think this is the first thing on which ethics should begin. And later comes the society, the country, and various other issues. How is that we are going to teach them these things? They look at various leaders in various fields and try to follow them, emulate them. So we have to tell them who is to be emulated and who is not to be emulated. And we have various other issues. Governance is an issue in this country. We have two big businessmen, industrialists here. It affects not only educational institutes or industry, business, governance, everything. And we have to tell them why we are lagging behind. Take, for example, tax evasion in this country. None of us talk about it. Especially those who go on the platform, we never discuss this because it is common practice in our country. We don't consider tax evasion as a crime. Even for traffic violation, sometimes we are taken to task, but it is not so, except those who are caught or some sample cases. And because of this, there is a huge accumulation of black money. This black money is used for elections. Again comes the electoral malpractices. I have never seen a country where votes are bought and sold, neither in a developed country nor in an underdeveloped country. This is a unique country where this is being practiced, and we are not ashamed about it. And we call ourselves the largest democracy of the world. And we also take the money outside the country. You take any of the imports and exports. Once we were importing, now we are capable of manufacturing everything in this country. Because there is interest in import, even now our raw materials are exported and we are importing finished products. You must undergo all these things and analyze why this is happening. These are the things where the student has to know, the youngsters have to know the issues which is affecting the society. Crime against women, crime against children, infanticide, these are all the issues they must know about it. These are various issues I want them to be taught, and I want the government to take the initiative. Except a few like IIM or other issues, the government universities, the affiliating universities, where we have nearly 300-400 of them. Each of them have 300, 400, 500, sometimes have 1,000 colleges, affiliated colleges. This is not a subject in the government universities. It is important that we should teach this subject to the students, and government should take the initiative. And we should tell them who was a great leader in this country. Of course, even now we have some leaders, but mostly they cannot be emulated. We had Pandit Nehru, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, we had our own Kamaraj in this state. When he died, Kamaraj died, he had only 40 rupees and 5 sets of dress. That's what he owned, not a house, nothing. We want this kind of leaders in this country, and the youngsters must know who are our leaders and who should be our leader. This is the thing which I want to be taught to the students, and it is time now that we realize the importance of ethics, values and leadership. Thank you.
Mr. G. Vishwanathan, who straddles the world of politics as well as education, told us that ethics is really about compliance. Can we look at smoking, drinking, drugs as critical issues in ethical education? Can we look at tax evasion as a crime? But more importantly, who are our great leaders? You know, and they're echoing the same thing that Gaurishwaran started with. Are they celebrities, or are they people who have had a ethical core, and are we able to articulate, express that? VIT says that it has a ethics curricula as part of its DNA of its curriculum, which is an extraordinary thing to have achieved, because to sustain that is really difficult. I'm now going to thank you, sir, for your remarkable insights into ethics and education. Now we have a very young entrepreneur, Sijo Kuruvilla George, who's going to tell you, give you his take. Now, the test of Sijo's ethical commitment would be to finish his talk in time that we have prescribed. Thank you. Welcome.
So test would be to finish in time. I've kept a timer as well to keep myself in check. It's a truly humbling experience to actually be in this particular forum, actually speaking and being a part of the particular panel as well. So to provide a bit of a background, I did my engineering in mechanical engineering long time back in CET, College of Engineering, Trivandrum. I have no freaking clue why I did mechanical engineering. I thought it would be about cars. It was not about cars. We had a lot of gamma in it. And then after turning up mechanical engineering, I realized there's hardly any girls in the entire college. So, I mean, in that particular batch. So all in all, it was a very grand trick of fooling you into it. There is a huge adage of the royal mix and everything. We think that it's much cool and everything, and sort of make a huge hue and cry about it. So this is how I also ended up doing my engineering. And I was told that in a forum, which is a serious forum like this, you have to start with anecdote and say that, hey, when I was 7 years old, I did this and I did that. Really good advice, but unfortunately, I don't think I really did a lot of things when I was 7 or 8. And the answer to that was, you can always cook up a story. Nobody anyway knows about you. So might as well start with a small introduction. So I did my mechanical engineering. I did my 4 years of engineering. I absolutely didn't do anything in college. That's the hard realization that I've had. When I did my engineering, I thought that I was doing a lot of stuff, but it was a 4 years of paid vacation. Passing examinations was just a joke. You just have to pick up last 4 or 5 years question papers and you sort of figure out a way to park. The university is anyways lazy, so the question paper doesn't really get updated. So that also was an easy piece in itself. Did a lot of politics and everything in college, which is interesting because in Kerala I was part of a government college. And by the final year, if you don't really want to get in college, you come in the morning, decide to create a reason for a strike, and then you walk up and give a notice, and then you don't go to class in that particular day. This is after all your mass bunking and everything. So this is how I did my 4 years. The only thing that I did exciting and interesting in college was the fact that I was part of the basketball team. Not that we won a lot of games, we lost royally in a lot of number of games, but it was a fun and interesting thing to do while in college as well. So I'm just giving the perspective as to this is exactly what I did in my 4 years. I didn't do anything phenomenal. I ended up taking engineering because I had this notion that this is what I was signing up for. And after 4 years, accidentally, we ended up doing a small startup. And I would say accidentally because the only reason that motivated us to do a startup was actually the fact that we don't have much money while we were in college. And you at least need some money to, take your girl out on a date or something like that. And around the time that we got in, mobile phones are also there. You also needed something to recharge your mobile phones with. So these are the reasons, motivations which we started the company. Fortunately, we ended up doing a company because we heard about this concept called incubation. Technopark had opened up and we started a company. It's still running, fortunately. And as a result of which, I'll probably add on to what Madam said, because we also realized a lot of things are not really rocket science. We started in a state where it's not really known for entrepreneurship and stuff like that. We were the first student startup from the state. And eventually, after a few number of years, we ended up doing this initiative called Startup Village. It's a public-private partnership initiative. So what we do is we help young entrepreneurs or young students to come up with their ideas, and we help them sort of take their idea into the market. So that's what we do in Startup Village. It's a public-private partnership model incubator. So I think there is a concept of how we can get more private sector involved and stuff like that. Part of the reason why we're doing it is because that technology incubation in India sort of happened in the public domain, and which was a direct transposing of the model which they follow in the US. But then they realized that nothing was really working, where the model exactly doesn't work anymore. The private sector participation was really low, so the government of India decided to do a public-private partnership model incubator, and we were the first one in the country. It is also in response to the answer that, where are we going to get jobs for the 500 million people which is going to come out in the next decade or so. So these are the reasons why we should do it. In terms of broad focus, we look at student startups. We have a huge focus on student startups. We have a huge focus on product startups, and these are some of the things that we actually do. We are supported by Chris Gopalakrishnan. So where the private sector is doing enough to support the cause, I wouldn't be able to answer completely, but I'm sure that Chris has done enough to ensure that this initiative is running, and we are doing a small part in that the company that we founded is a private sector participant in the PPP initiative. So I really don't have a huge position on whether our institutions are teaching ethics or leadership. I don't think I'm really qualified to make a comment on that. But now that I'm here, I can at least provide my perspectives and views. On that, I'll probably take a few notes from Prabhu Chawla's editorial note, which he has mentioned. So in that, he has mentioned about the access, excellence, and employability as 3 pillars to take it forward. And some of the ways we're actually doing it in Startup Village is actually, in terms of access, we look at providing exposure and an opportunity. We work with the state government to try and come out with a policy supporting student entrepreneurs. And now this is extremely close to our heart. So it's a student entrepreneurship policy. What this policy does is it enables you to take 20% attendance and 4% grace marks if you are a student and if you're an entrepreneur. Now you get legitimately bunk 20% of your classes and sit and do your company and start up an incubator if you are a part of a startup. And this is there. Okay, I've completed my 5 minutes. I'll need to start wrapping up. So this is what we have actually achieved. And in terms of the policy, this was close to our heart because we used to love playing basketball. The reason why we used to love playing basketball is the fact that we can actually bunk class and get 20% attendance for playing basketball. And we extended the same argument and said that if someone is trying to create job and wealth in society, he should also be supported at least on par with someone who's trying to create, doing basketball and stuff like that. So with this in mind, the policy was announced last year. Now something interesting about this policy is the fact that if you look at the policy of Google, Google allows 20% of its employees' time to be spent on any project of their liking. And this kind of culture is actually driven by companies like Google. And this policy actually enables students in colleges to spend 20% of your time in your creative pursuit as well. And to answer the question of ethics and leadership and stuff like that, my personal take is the fact that at the end of the day, issues like Enron and those kinds of scenarios, I don't think the answer is more and more regulations. I think the answer is more and more leadership. And with that actually comes down to culture. And education institutions have a huge role to actually shaping that culture. And if you look at the way the corporate culture is also shaping up, we talk about culture codes and stuff like that. Facebook has a very interesting culture code. There are 3 lines. First is we ship fast. Second is done is better than perfect. And third one is freakingly awesome. They say that Mark is always right. Now, the interesting thing is they actually put it on paper. We knew that most organizations function like this. The boss is always right. but they actually have the audacity to actually put it on paper and say that, hey, this is always going to work. Now, if you look at it, these are the kind of guiding documents that actually go into building the next work culture. The point I'm trying to make is that the world is actually quite changing a lot. And these kinds of guiding principles sort of take the message forward. Google did a lot in terms of driving it forward, in terms of creating a new work culture and ethic. But if you really look at it, Google, what they tried to do was replicate the college environment. 2 PhD researchers ended up doing Google, and most of the things they did in Google was a direct reflection of what they did in their campuses. And there was one person who was guiding the whole vision behind them. That one person was a guy called Rajiv Motwani. He was a professor in Stanford, and that again was an Indian. Now, there is a huge insight to all these kinds of things as well. One quick thought before I conclude. The world is changing. We actually trained the entire generation, my generation, for copywriting, handwriting skills. Now, that was required, because unless you had a good handwriting, probably you would never got far in life. But by the time I graduated, all I needed to know was Google, and then I had a computer. My handwriting skills were inadequate. I think the problem is not about the fact that we don't exactly understand how this actually world has changed. I think the entire world is grappling with it. I think the media industry is grappling with it. Education industry is grappling with it. We met the Coursera founders saying that what is the actual value that education is adding. But the answer to this is, in my opinion, is entirely about learning. We have an issue, or we have an opportunity of leadership. We have an opportunity of new 21st century skill sets which are required. We also have an opportunity of scale. Now, we are operating at a different scale altogether. Now, we need to have new challenges and answers for this. Quick thought before I part. It's not only the employability factor of students. The fact is that the expectations of workforce are also changing. It's always a question of talent. Now, this particular card holder, one of the reasons I quit my first job was because I was forced to wear this all the time. Now, it could seem trivial. And the reason that I quit my next job after I got into graduation from MBA in Great Lakes, I was working in a consulting firm. They forced me to use a particular email application which I hated. I had an iPhone, I had a mobile phone, and I wanted to use Gmail on it, and they wouldn't allow me to use that. Now, this is the reality. It's actually coming into picture. And you need to figure out a new way to engage this new workforce as well. So there's a challenge of trying to figure out all these answers. But at the end of the day, there are a couple of people who drove the character and the culture within me, within our colleagues and everything. It's either one of our professors back in college. I can fondly recall one high school professor by the name of M.G. George, who was my NCC professor. I can also fondly remember this person called Venkat. So these are the ways in which we can actually go about doing the whole thing. Yes, there is a role of education and education institutions, but it has to be rethought, and that's only part.
CJ, you fell short of a gold medal in ethical presentation by about a minute and a half. And when it comes to regulating presentation, the moderator has the last word. This is in jest rather than earnest. I hope you take it in the right spirit. So next speaker, Chiranjeev Banerjee, has 6 slides and 5 minutes to show that in. And he brings to us a wealth of extraordinary experience from the corporate world, a very well-known corporate house. And so Chiranjeev, your show. Thank
you. Very good morning to all of you. I must compliment the organizers for choosing such a strong topic, because India is in the news for all the wrong reasons. And I think we better have a deep awakening amongst ourselves as responsible citizens of the country, whether it is students or teachers or parents or people who are in the governance or people from the corporate world like us. While I was flipping through one of the news articles a few months back, what was really steaming was that India is ranked amongst one of the poorest countries in terms of corruption, global corruption index. We are ranked 69th by one report. In another report, we were ranked 94th. And to my surprise, what we could see is that some of the African countries, which were there in the global economy for wrong reasons, were better than us. So what it takes for us actually to really come out of it as responsible citizens. If you look at World Economic Forum, what it states is that corruption adds to 10% of cost of doing business for a global organization, and for doing a proper procurement in any country which is such high on the global corruption index, it adds up to 25% of the cost. So what is doing to the Indian economy? it is actually crippling us in terms of the rating that we have from the foreign agencies. It's also deeply questioning the practices that we follow at various spheres of corporate governance. But if we look at from where does corporate governance stems, an interesting fact goes back to our school days when we were taught moral science. Now, while the curriculum in most of the boards, we do have something on the syllabus, but how well we have been able to enforce it. If we have been able to enforce it, then I'm sure we wouldn't have cases like Nirvaya or drunken driving on the wrong side, and where there is a moral decadence of our basic hygiene and our thought process. Now let's look at what are the key reasons for such kind of a challenge. Well, we have a whole lot of change in the economy, which is getting driven by our consumption power, which is getting driven by information technology and telecom, which is getting driven by our increasing purchasing power of parity. So there's a host of factors which are, aligning the larger part of our country towards the metros. Now there's a whole lot of difference in the values and culture that we have when we come from a smaller town or a village to a large metro. If you look at, no more it is a taboo to work in the night shifts when we go to a call center or when we go to an IT organization. But this means that we need to be more responsible in handling our environment. We need to be a more informed individual. Now, where does it stem from? It has to stem from our school days. It has to stem from our parents. It has to stem from enforcement in the curriculum. It has to stem from having periodic reviews. Now we need to really enforce this very stringently in all our curriculum, whether it is a primary education, secondary education, or higher education. So today what is happening at the corporate houses? If you look at when we go for campus placements, we would see a guy who is outstanding in terms of core subjects, but when you try and quiz him on the social skills, we see the guy completely blank. So what are the things which are really creating barriers for entry into deep leadership and governance? Now leadership, if you connect with ethics, we call it ethical leadership. But ethical leadership is not something which can be founded overnight. And you cannot expect a student to really become an ethical leader overnight. So what is important for us is to build this entire ecosystem and build the bridge. And this can only be done when all the pillars who are in the ecosystem, whether it's the parents, teachers, our schools, the community at large, the board of governance, and the corporate houses put our hands together and then put up a deep sense of urgency and enforcement in the curriculum. The other part which we also want to put across is training. Now training as such, we all look at putting up training for enabling the students to get jobs. But how well or how equipped they are to work in a cross-cultural, multicultural environment. If I look at a student who is from one part of the country, a lot of them have a huge amount of reluctance in migrating across the country and working with a cross-diverse population. Now, which means that we need a high dosage of social skills. And this can only happen with the learning curve, which means one needs to go through all those things which they have studied in the moral science, and they need to have a learning environment which is enabled in the institutions, which is enabled in the corporate houses, which is enabled in the places where they interact with people. And today, to be very frank with you, we don't see that kind of a curriculum either in the schools or in the colleges or even in the corporate houses. Now, is there an exception? Yes, there are lots of exceptions. And these exceptions are few, but then some of these exceptions are really culminating into making the leaders future ready, making them better in terms of softer aspects of leadership. Now, on the softer aspects of leadership, well, I don't think people can really read them and assimilate them. It has to come with practice. So where do they get this practice? They can only get the practice by really, enabling more and more forums, bodies, discussions, which can actually really take the human being out of a person and make him a better, socially more responsible human being doing good for the society. Thanks. That's all what I wanted to present.
Okay, Chiranjeev, thank you for telling us that the whole journey of ethics, education ethics and leadership has to go beyond ethical cynicism and ethical fanaticism of the kind that we have seen in this country as well. And ethics is not an overnight stand, it is a long drawn process that you have to espouse. And I would open this time and floor to some questions. If you could just address this question specifically to individuals, that would be great. If not, then I will sort of direct. Yes, please. Yeah. Do they have a mic or something? Do they have, yeah, can you start? First question. You are 1, this is 2, this is 3, and 4, 5. If we can go beyond 5, I'll call. If you go beyond 5, then I'll let you know. So.
Good morning, all of you. My name is Balaji, and my question is to Mr. G. Vishwanathan. Sir, you mentioned that today's universities and colleges are teaching professional ethics to students. I'm an engineer. I did my graduation and post-graduation in engineering, in mechanical engineering precisely. And I had professional ethics in both the graduation and post-graduation. When I look back about what I learned, my observation about professional ethics is, it is a subject that needs no preparation. All the student has to do is just get up in the morning, go to the exam hall, write something and get back, and the university will give them 70 to 80% easily, no doubts about it.
Now please stick to your question.
My question is, is there any other healthy alternative to instill leadership and ethical qualities on students' mind other than keeping it as a mere subject where the professor walks in and takes the attendance, go back and do nothing?
Use that mic. Yes.
Of course, teaching is one part. The other thing is setting an example. That's the best thing for teaching them by example, which is very difficult now. So that's why I said, at least they should know something about those who live good life, good leaders, those who practice ethics in their lives, in professional, especially engineers, doctors, auditors, etc. This is the thing which has to be told to them, and it should be made a compulsory subject.
Okay, great. Next question, please. Yeah. There. It takes a lot of time for mics to come, so can you do it? Yes, please. Yes.
My question is,
what's your name? Tell us about yourself. Just your name.
My name is Vijayan.
Okay.
I'm from Chennai.
Yeah. Question.
Leadership and ethics is now a rare trait, but it has to be inculcated from the age of about 7 or 8 by the practicing politicians and leaders. Why is that? We have to study after 22 years, 23 years. It has to be informed and set an example at the age of about 7 or 8. Then India will be better.
Okay. Would anyone like to take the question? Gauri, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah. You're actually repeating what I had mentioned earlier, that the inculcation of values and the molding of attitudes starts when they are very young, and we need to very seriously look at how we are going to integrate it into our curriculum. I'll give you a small example. When you teach chemistry, you have a compound like HCl, but you also have hydrogen and chloride, which are very unstable. You put them together, it becomes a stable component, and that's a way of teaching children about teamwork and collaboration. So these things have to be instilled. You won't get politicians who are brilliantly ethical unless you start working on them at a very young age.
Okay, thank you. Next, yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Rajagopalan. My question is addressed to you, sir, as the chairperson of this panel. The topic says, our institutions teach neither leadership nor ethics. My question is, how many of our institutions themselves are founded on ethics, and how many of those institutions demonstrate leadership that is ethical? Considering the questionable backgrounds of the promoters of educational institutions, that itself is a question I want to ask you, sir.
It's a great question, but it's like giving a no choice at all. And how can I change my parents, you tell me? Can I have another set of parents? See, we have... This point is that, just a second. You see, the question is, that which is founded on false values will take care of itself. I mean, don't we see the fall of not just institutions but businesses that had the kind of wealth that far exceeded the GDP of countries? Those institutions have fallen. Anderson, Enron, Satyam, you ask a question. So if you look at if your horizon of perception is longer than just 1 quarter or 5 years or 10 years, this is where leadership and ethics education comes into play, because your range of perception has to be broadened beyond 1 or 2 years, because you have to see institutions that have survived the ravages of time, and then you realize why they have survived. And so this then will become the informing values of institutions of the future. So if you really ask that question, now what can we do about those institutions which have been founded on false values or ethics, lack of it, then it begs the question, I mean, how can you really change something that you have no control over? Now what you can do is going forward and doing things, learning from where these institutions have failed, why they have failed to deliver. See, we see many institutions that promote horse riding, free laptop computers, swimming lessons, and I'm just wondering, is this tourism promotion or education? Now, I'm sure you will know that these so-called tourism promoters have fallen by the wayside. And that's evidence-based, and so your question is very important, but this is all I can say. Your next question.
So my name is Abhinav, and I'd like to... And I'm from
Abhinav, before you do, the lady was there for a long time, so okay. Good.
Very good morning, sir. Yeah. I'm Vasuprada from School of Law, Shastra University. My question is for Mr. G. Vishwanathan. Like you say, inclusion of subject on ethics is very important. I have a basic doubt. In a society where marks and grades are given more importance, when you include ethics as subject, will it be valued? And I mean, according to the marks the students are getting in their examinations, or will there be any specific kind of evaluation? And don't you think, like, in spite of bringing up a special or a separate subject for ethics or leadership, can it be more effective if leadership and ethics are imparted along with the other subjects by teaching us how to handle those subjects, how to become a leader of those subjects, how to deal those subjects with ethics?
Okay, so quick response.
No, it was already pointed out by somebody, even though the subject is there, it is not taken seriously. One engineer here pointed out. That's why I said it should be made compulsory so that the students will learn many things. At least they should pass. Otherwise it will be difficult. They won't study the subject at all. We want them to know what is happening and what should be done for the future in this country and for individuals.
Okay, next
question.
So
my name is Abhinav, and my question actually refers to something that you said in your in the introduction of your speech. So you said that you cannot have a subject...
Where is Abhinav? I can't
Yes,
see.
sir. Hi.
Okay, good. Oh, you're there. Okay.
So you mentioned in your introduction speech that you cannot have a subject called leadership which trains leaders. But isn't that what, broadly speaking, what education itself does? We have a subject called civil engineering which trains civil engineers. We have a subject called mechanical engineering which trains mechanical engineers. And we have a subject called computer science engineering which trains computer science people. So do you think that, broadly speaking, the entire perspective of the fact that just because you have a subject does not mean that you'll master that subject also applies not just in terms of ethics and leadership alone, but overall in the entire sense of education itself?
Well, I'll allow my other panelists who haven't got a chance, but let me tell you, if you are the subject, where do you go for the curriculum? See, ethics and leadership starts with you. It's fundamentally with you. And if you are the subject, then it requires reflection, not just curriculum. You can put as much stuff in the curriculum as you want, but if there is no reflection, you see, if moral science courses could create great moralists, if reading the cricket manual could create a Tendulkar, then we would have made so many Tendulkars. We have made so many moralists, so many great people. The fact is that there is always that piece that says that I have to, see, that's why ethics cannot fully be taught, nor can it be caught. It has to be revealed. And the revelation comes from you, from your reflection. And if there is not enough reflection, you can have tons of moral science lessons, but you will still have, when we went to school, when a hard question was asked, the bright boys would raise their hands. the not so bright ones would drop their heads, and there would be a third category who would not know the answer but still raise their hands, and most of them you will find in Parliament. The point I'm trying to make is we need reflection, and that's very critical, and that's not part of our education process. Anyone would like to reflect on this question? Would you have something to say? Would you have? Okay, you probably didn't hear that question right. Next question, please.
Excuse me. My name is Vig.
There's another lady who raised her hand. Can you? Yes, please. And then we'll take that will be the last. Yes, please. We have barely 7 minutes, so we'll finish. I have 7 minutes, right? Okay, great.
I'll make it short.
No, you can't speak without the mic because we can't hear you. So you have to speak. Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
I'm Vasudha Prakash, founder director of VXL Educational Trust. This question is for Ms. Gauri Ishwaran. In your experience, have you ever used biographies of people, of leaders, to teach students ethics and leadership? Because in my experience of teaching and learning in other countries, they use simple biographies and they study deeply and show films about great people. Is this a technique that you have used, or would you recommend that?
No, it's very much a technique. As I said, when I said it has to be integrated into the curriculum. For example, what you have said is a part of social studies. Instead of having the books that we have now, the social studies curriculum that I created related to these small biopics that the children learnt about. If you study a curriculum, you'll find children get to class 9, they have no idea about world leaders. They may know about Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, that's all. So it behoves on us to make the curriculum broad-based the way you have suggested. And for primary schools, you have little plays, little stories that you read out to them, and age appropriate increase. And they start analyzing who was Abraham Lincoln, who was Mother Teresa, were they leaders, were they not leaders, is there anything to inspire us from that? It has to be built into the curriculum.
Okay, unfortunately...
Good morning, sir.
No, sorry.
My name is Vignesh.
Sorry. This should be the last question.
Yeah, my name is Vignesh.
I'm sorry, we can take these questions after, but this was the person who's been raising his hand for a while. Yes, sir. Yeah. Mic, can you use the mic, please? Can you give him the mic? Right there? Yes, thank you. Yes.
Aristocracy is always ahead of meritocracy in our system, thanks to the unique capitation. The people, you said the third category, they are the one who run the colleges. So when I can buy degrees, in this country it is very easy to buy a degree in ethics as well. So unless otherwise we reform or radical reform in our education system, ethics and leadership is purely a commodity. This is what I think.
Okay, if you think, do you have a
question?
But
maybe because VIT is unique. See, of course, I'm not blaming him. He is much better than others. So what is that?
I got your question, but is there an answer here? Yes. Anybody here?
What is the question?
Chiranjeev?
Capitation fees.
You said you were talking about capitation. Capitation and corruption are the basic issues in this country, because no institution is allowed to announce its fees and get it in checks and drafts. We are doing it. As far as VIT is concerned, we don't take cash. We get only checks and drafts, which is not possible in other colleges, and mostly colleges, because they have no option. And you will have to pay everybody every year. Where will you pay if you get it in a check? I am in a problem. The other colleges also, they are under problem because they have to pay in cash. This is a big problem in this country. There requires a major reform in education. You are right. Capitation, corruption are the basic issues, and it has to be resolved at least in the 2014 government.
Okay, so, I would, unfortunately, in deference to the next panel, I have to conclude here. In conclusion, this is what I will sum up. The whole journey has been, in this 1 hour, has been as follows. We heard issues around, 3 C's. First C was compliance. Stop smoking, drugs, and drinking. Tax evasion should be punished. So this is compliance. Toilet training is compliance. Moral science classes are compliance. The second aspect is commitment. Now, it's not just about compliance. Beyond compliance, what is it that you can do that takes you to the ethical leadership space? And the third and the final, the most important part, I think, which got articulated was the issue of consciousness. Because ethics and leadership as a function of consciousness. I'll end with a little, very small story of Gandhi traveling by a train. One of his shoes falls down on the railway track. And as one has fallen down, if I was Gandhi standing on the train, my reaction would be, what happened to my shoe? But Gandhi's reaction was, he threw the other of the pair. And when he was asked why he threw the other of the pair as the train was moving, he said, the poor man who now has a pair to wear. One is of no value to him, one is of no value to me. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your concluding remarks. Another strong round of applause, if you will, ladies and gentlemen, to our wonderful panelists. And I request Mr. Chadla to please make his way onto the stage and give away mementos to each one of them. Thank you for being here and providing ample information and some food for thought for us this afternoon. We'd once again like to thank all of you for being here. A warm round of applause, if you will, for our chairperson, Mr. Debashish Chatterjee, Mr. G. Vishwanathan, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, Mr. Chiranjeev Banerjee, Ms. Gauri Ishwaran, and Mr. Sijo Kuruvilla George. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more session, one more very interesting panel discussion before we move forward to lunch and a small tea-coffee break. We do hope that your hunger for knowledge is more than your hunger for food. So we hope you will stay back with us and listen to the next session as well, because it's absolutely interesting. A quick moment for a group photo opportunity, if you will.